came to academia a little bit later and scholarship a little bit later in my life. So I started off after university, or during university really. I went to the UK and during law school I should say, and worked in a criminal law firm for a couple of years before returning and doing my traineeship, I think they call it now, but we used to call it articles back then, with the Victorian Government Solicitor's Office. So I did rotations there in all of their sections, and did that for a few years, and then I moved to Department of Treasury and Finance, where I was legal counsel. Then I was legal counsel at Telstra, so what we call general counsel or in-house counsel. And then did some further study in the US at a place called Duke Law School before coming back and starting my academic career.
Do you have any interesting stories from your time at Duke or over in the States?
I mean, interesting story. I mean, they love basketball, so there was a lot of... I remember doing camp out. Every student in essence goes to like a big field, you know, with they get RVs and tents, and they camp out for a couple of nights, and you get throughout the night. So everyone, you know, it's university college, so everyone's drinking and stuff. And throughout, you have to stay awake throughout, I think it's 2 days, and you get intermittent kind of call outs, so that you have to run to a specific point in time, a specific place. And if you miss that, you get kicked out of the competition. But if you make it the 2 nights, every time you get called out, you get in the draw, so you don't even win season tickets to go to the Cameron Crazy Stadium to watch Duke play.
That sounds incredible.
It was a pretty interesting experience, because you're at university now. It's very different from Australian university, because you know, you would go to classmates' dorms or houses or whatever, and they had posters of basketball players who were their peers at university. It's like you having one of your peers like on the wall as a picture. So it's a really
crazy.
different kind of experience. It was very good.
I just wanted to start off with asking if you had any advice for students wanting to follow a similar path.
I mean, it's a really interesting question that I've thought a lot about throughout my career, because just going through that little mini CV, you can see it was kind of, I jumped around a little bit, you know, even going from criminal law to government, and then private, and all of that kind of thing. And that was part of that. At the start, I didn't know what I was doing. So there was a little bit of that. Because you don't really get, and you still, I don't know that you do now. I've been speaking to my students, and I think this is right. But you certainly didn't back then. You don't really get much guidance in law other than the typical path, which is, you know, go and apply for a kind of a summer clerkship or winter clerkship of some sort, and then that might get you kind of an inside lead into a potential grad position after. And that's been a very long story. And that kind of didn't fit for me. I did some clerkships, but didn't think that I wanted to go and do that kind of practice. And so I kind of just muddled my way through it. But one of the things now in hindsight that I think later in my career development I started to do was a thing that I think lawyers may be not that great at sometimes, which is really look inward. I think because we focus so much on clients, we are dealing with other people's issues, so we don't look at ourselves as much. And I think that I really started to realize what type of person I was, and that kind of pointed me to a particular direction. So, you know, the advice that I say is really start to look early on at the type of person you are. So one of the pieces of advice I got when I was looking at criminal law in the UK very early on, I asked one of the most senior partners there, I said, you know, what do you think of me? Like, you know, what am I like? You know? And, you know, he had some views on the different types of lawyer that you can be.
Interesting.
And one of them was you can be the type of lawyer that is at a desk doing a lot of the grunt work, which is important work. Or you can be a type of lawyer, and he was talking specifically about criminal law, the people person, because you need to deal with people a lot, obviously, when you're looking at criminal law matters. And so that really started to just get me thinking about what type of person I was. And that I really liked to look at. First of all, I discovered I like to look at legal policy type things that had a broader effect than an individual client, which is still important, but like as a person, I liked that. And then so that leads me to things like VGSO and Treasury and Finance, that kind of makes sense. And then I kind of discovered that I wanted to find my own way in terms of the matters that I was dealing rather than reacting. So that kind of led me into more of the academic role. And because I get to explore these issues and discuss them in classrooms and research about those. So it's a long way to get to your answer to your very simple question, but you need to start really thinking about who you are and certain characteristics that you have, and then that will, I think, provide you good guidance.
What should students focus on externally? What skills?
Yeah. I think that I think one of the most important things that I've discovered in law, and I think it's increasingly important, is interpersonal skills. So being able to deal with people and people of all different, a variety of people. Like you need to be, I guess it leads you to a kind of more meta skill of adaptability, and that applies to how you engage with people, but also engage with your legal practice. I don't think that these days it's really that possible to kind of just do one thing. Things change too much, and you need to be able to adapt. And I think that kind of requires you to look at what, again, your core skill set is and how you operate, and then being able to adapt that to meet new situations. So I think that's really important. That I guess it sounds a bit cliched, like, you need to be adaptable, but I think you do. I mean, in legal practice, in academia, in any kind of legal aspect that you end up in, you need to be able to confront things that just arise because it's not always planned. I think that's one of the key things. Increasingly, but I don't know that it's as a complex thing anymore, because it's kind of, what do they call them, digital native. I mean, technology is important. I think you need to, as a lawyer, know how to engage with technology effectively, differently to other people in profession, because you're the one who ultimately has the responsibility and accountability to a variety of stakeholders. So how you deal with technology, we still are like the backstop in our profession. And so I think the way you engage with technology is important and very unique to the legal profession.
With respect to post-GFC international financial law, what really changed there?
So a lot and not a lot. So, I mean, I think this is just a really a kind of consistent theme when you've got in life generally, but in economics, in commerce, finance. So you have a big crisis, then you have an immediate response saying that we need to stop this kind of thing happening again, and then things get a bit better, and then we kind of, slide a little bit back into our usual tendencies and habits. So I think after the global financial crisis, which was 2008 and 2007 and 8, and I know we've had several of the crises since then, but it was a significant one. And one of the things that was really, I think, key was a change in how we looked at things at a meta level. So we started to really focus on our goal of ensuring financial stability. And I think something that has been a little bit underplayed in the financial sector and economic sector has been the significance of sustainability, not only in terms of environmental sustainability, which is key, but also financial and economic sustainability. I kind of saw that the ethos was that we tempered our expectations. It used to be wild economic growth, achieve that at any kind of cost. And I think we started to reconsider that perspective, and regulation came into effect to kind of, or to give effect to that kind of ethos.
And how would you view that playing out in Australia? What are the sort of current strengths and weaknesses in Australia?
So Australia has for a very long time, and we didn't have as big a negative the negative effect that from the global financial crisis. So I don't think that we had the same kind of reckoning as some other parts of the world. We kind of said that we kind of think that we are take a prudent approach, so kind of best practice approach to what we call financial regulation or prudential regulation. In America, they call it safety and soundness regulation. And but what we did focus on was, I think, a need for more effective coordination among our key financial regulators. This has been an ongoing challenge between, in particular, ASIC and APRA, who are our two key financial regulators, as well as the Reserve Bank, our central bank. So we kind of wanted to enhance coordination, but we left the system of their engagement a little bit informal. We have been somewhat reluctant to engage in structural change because we thought things were generally okay.
Could you maybe speak to the effectiveness of these systems?
Well, I think that one of the big challenges, so whenever you have, again, any kind of crisis or scandal in the sector, there is, and this is a good thing, there is some kind of emphasis on our regulators and how they're doing their job. A lot of the tasks of our regulation, APRA has a fairly defined or clearly defined role. When we find new issues, we often add to ASIC's workload. That seems to have been the trend for us. I think that it does speak to some challenges of how we are regulating in Australia, but I think that we need to, it's not just a matter of regulation, it's a matter, I think, of how we deal with finance and commerce in Australia, and then the regulation fits within that. So I don't know that we're always willing to make the big calls that we need to make in order for the regulators to be effective.
What sort of calls do you think would need to be made to make them more effective?
Well, that's the really hard question, right? But I think there are so many repeated kind of instances of scandals that have been happening, and I think that there have been some recent ones. The debate there goes on to are we willing to hold to account certain institutions for their conduct? Are we really, do we have in place the I guess the accountability framework to allow the regulators to act? And so I think that we don't seem to have gotten that balance right yet. So
is that balance though inherently political?
I think so, and that's why I think that the kind of focus on the regulators needs to happen in context of what society's willing to do. I'm currently teaching banking law and tell the students that it's a constant a thing throughout our history, and not only in Australia, that the economy is doing well. The regulators, if they act to kind of stop certain either consumer harm or broader financial harm or economic harm, they are criticized because they seem to be, they're standing in your way, right? Because you want to do things. And this is a broader issue for all lawyers. The client or society wants to act. Yes. And then the lawyers or the regulators are saying, I think we need to look at what might happen that is bad, with varying success. When the bad thing happens, then we're either criticized for not having put in place the measures to stop that, or we're kind of told that we acted too slow, or so that regulators and lawyers, regulators in finance and lawyers have that kind of in common.
To maybe segue into another area of research into equity crowdfunding. What does that mean for founders and investors?
Yeah, so equity crowdfunding, I think most people are familiar with crowdfunding these days, what the Kickstarter and stuff like that. So it's when you go online and you've got a project and you want to get some funding, and you may not be able to either get that through some kind of private investment channel, you may not have personal funds, or your business or project might be too small to go out to the public to get share funding. Equity crowdfunding takes that concept and really applies it to shares in the corporate context. So in I don't want to go too much into corporations law and traumatize your listeners, but or viewers. But the thing is, if you've got a company, there are a couple of ways that you can get funding. If you're a small company or a startup, it's sometimes difficult to get that funding. You don't want to rely on yourself or on your personal funds. You may not have enough. A bank may be reluctant to fund your activity because they don't know you and your business. You can't go out to the public to get shares because you're not big enough, really. And so equity crowdfunding is a portal where you go online and you can ask us, the internet world, to kind of chip in and provide you some funding, and then we become shareholders. And it's a really interesting concept, because what's happened now is you can use equity crowdfunding within certain limitations, and you can still remain private rather than converting to a public company, which has more onerous regulation and costs associated with it. But I've argued in the past that this is a kind of a fundamental change into how we deal with corporations, because in essence it's making some private companies public without acknowledging in the legal framework really that they are public, because you can have thousands of shareholders, which is not what a private company is really.
But do you think this was brought in because of an issue with private funding, relative to other countries where there is more, dry powder? Yeah,
I think there were many reasons. I mean, it was all the rage at a particular time, so other jurisdictions were doing it. It came at a time in particular where there was constrained funding environment. After the global financial crisis, you had some really kind of stringent rules come into place about how you can make loans. People were a bit jittery, a bit nervous, and you had there was kind of a bit of a push in society in general to open up funding opportunities outside of what they were of the sector that they were criticizing, which was the big financial sector. So they kind of saw this as a democratization attempt, or part of that, alongside crypto and all of this kind of other stuff. It was this push to kind of give power back, I guess, to the people. That's how it was presented. And if you go through all of the kind of the reviews of the time, government reviews, Senate reviews and stuff, you can see that there was a lot of analysis of people were struggling to make their own way, and this was seen as one additional option.
Where do you see this area going moving forward? Do you think the democratization will sort of continue that push, or will it sort of go in some other direction?
So I mean, the democratization is sometimes. I think it exists to a certain extent. I'm a person who believes that you've got a constant reaction and counter reaction. So I think that what happens is you get these ideals, people use them in good faith, and then there is always going to be some element of control that comes into place. And I think that happens with every part of finance and outside of finance as well. So I think that it is an option that people will have to be able to invest through this, and that can be a good thing. The point that I've made in the past is that people have to see real advantages to that, and there are two potential ones. They can be either financial, which is really hard for these kind of small startups, or they can be kind of broader social advantages. So a lot of the equity crowdfunding is based on this idea that we've got a really exciting idea that plays to your particular interest. You see a lot of breweries, right? Localized breweries using this. And if you don't see your involvement or benefit in that, then it's a little bit risky. Its ongoing success, but I think it has a niche. It's developed a kind of niche that is looks like it's doing well.
What's your take on AI? How do you think
AI? Well, that that's a really difficult question to what's my take on. I think I don't know. Like I think that there is an interesting thing happening with AI and other technologies. I mean, there's a certain merging of the two. So you've got and I kind of saw them as two different phenomena happening. So at the start, after the global financial crisis, you kind of had this, as I said, democratization attempt, and crypto was part of that. The ideal of crypto was part of that. And so it was presented as an empowerment mechanism. Don't let the banks and government dictate how you deal with your money. Or you can do that as a group. That was the ideal. And AI seemed that in some respects to offer a bit of a contrary approach, or a different approach to that, which was almost presenting a lot of the power to certain, particularly technology companies, to kind of dictate how society developed, right? Because they would create a kind of a platform, and then it would help us get certain answers. But it was not as immediately, to me, democratic a process. So it kind of presented two different approaches in society from one perspective. They seem to be merging somewhat. I published, or am in the process of publishing, a paper with CY on AI in the boardroom. And so I think that it's presenting some interesting kind of challenges, as well as opportunities in how we engage in commerce and finance, and who is making decisions and how they are held to account. Because one of the key things that we were looking at was who ultimately do we want to hold to account. We were talking at the start, or a bit earlier, about some of the challenges of regulation, and I think it becomes even harder if you have AI, because you're kind of starting to say things like, well, we encourage the use of AI for efficiency purposes, perhaps, and if you are encouraging that use in society, if things go wrong, then who is accountable? We're already struggling with that in a regulatory perspective. How do we deal with that in an AI world? So I think that is one of the biggest challenges, and it kind of is separate or different to what the crypto challenge was. I mean, related, but it's who do you hold to account in finance, which is already a hard question before AI.
What are the current approaches to that from Australian and international standard or perspective? Like, how do we measure that?
I mean, I think even with all of the technological advancements that we've had in Australia and in many other jurisdictions a bit of an approach to kind of fit it into the existing framework. So, looking at what our existing rules are for financial services and banking, and saying if it looks like that kind of activity, then we'll regulate it in that way. I think that there are people that debate that for the use of crypto, because they kind of say, oh, what is a crypto? Is it a security? Is it, so there's all that debate, which others are much more expert on than I am. But in terms of AI, I think it's present. I don't know that we have really thought about that. We have guidelines, so what we call them guardrails sometimes. So we're kind of saying use AI and do really good things, so long as you look after ethical kind of moral concerns. But we haven't really said what those are. And again, I think we're still at a stage where we don't know exactly what could go terribly wrong. We've had some examples of what could go terribly wrong, but we haven't really thought about that. And that's why this paper that we drafted was kind of looking at what is the monitoring function of a board of directors in a company, including the banking sector, when you're have some kind of AI integration into the decision-making process. And we're looking at, does it fit into the current laws, particularly like duty of care kind of concepts. And there were some tensions that we identified there, and some recent High Court cases that could look at this or didn't contemplate this issue, and we can see that it would be difficult to hold someone to account.
With respect to, I guess, the future of banking and how AI will impact it, I've read in the news there's been a lot of layoffs recently, and it does go to that AI is going to take the jobs and whatnot. How do you view banking changing in the next few years and decades?
I mean, I think that it's if you take a long look, it seems to be a kind of consistent trajectory. So if you were talking to people in the 50s about banking and finance, they were kind of discussing and considering, kind of back-end ways of managing data and information, because they were moving from people doing the back-end work to it being on computers.
Yep.
And so this was, taking some jobs there. It seems to have been, and then, you move towards kind of ATMs and, kind of all of these technological developments. At every stage, they've been presented as a potential job taker. I don't know the statistics to be complete, and you'd need to do some kind of statistical analysis to determine, what kind of employment opportunities were offered in banking at a particular point in time versus now. But it does seem to be a trend. We seem to have decreased our branch offerings. That's pre-AI. That took a bunch of jobs in the banking and finance sector. We seem to have had a big kind of, or at the start potentially of another big movement in, efficiency, attempts in the sector that incorporate AI. I think it's a little bit too early to kind of know exactly how useful, I guess, AI will be in the sector in replicating or taking some of these jobs. And I think the latest announcements that have been made in terms of job reductions have not really identified AI in as a public statement as a key factor. But you have to wonder.
Efficiency.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
I do believe that tokenization is sort of a big focus.
Yes.
How do you view that?
I mean, again, I think that tokenization represents another kind of evolution of what has kind of been happening in terms of a different kind of asset class. I wonder, what the end aim always is of these things, and I think that one of the things that I started to ask after the global financial crisis, whenever I started to look at an innovation, is why are we doing that? And so I don't always know the why I get, other than there is always a why. There is always a reason, and some of the times that reason is for financial benefit of a certain category of people. And so I like to ask, what is the broader social advantage that is being presented, and I can't always see that.
That's a good point. Asking yourself what the actual problem they're trying to solve. There isn't a problem, and it's more purely for enjoyment or something, or financial gain. It's maybe is socially good.
I mean, and there are certainly advantages to just doing things that are that provide that kind of enjoyment, and that's not to detract from that, or to say that just because it's that's the goal or the aim or the achievement that you get from it, that it's not worthy of doing. But I mean, I think that kind of allows us to, I think that then we do start to need to ask, what are the broader implications of this technology that we're introducing, if that's the aim, and who is benefiting from that, who is not benefiting from that. I think these are important questions that we need to kind of ask. And I'm reluctant to say, because I can't remember exactly who made this quote, but they were talking after the global financial crisis, or one of the former Fed Reserve chairs, that his view was like he couldn't think of positive technological innovation in the past like 20 or 30 years other than the ATM, because his view was like, in the 50s and 60s in America, you had a thriving, amazing economy, and we had engaged in all this financial innovation in the past however many decades, and what what ultimately was beneficial to society as a whole. I mean, there are various arguments that you can make, but that's just one perspective. So I've started to think about these more modern technological innovations and say, well, why are we doing this? And I think that is a perspective that lawyers can, or legal professionals can really bring to the table, because and again, people that are listening that are thinking of careers, I think one of the ways that you can be or are a lawyer, and one of the things that you'll discover is that when you're in the room, particularly in a transaction, one of the most interesting things I discovered when I was a junior was that the lawyers across the table sometimes had more in common, and the clients had more in common, because they wanted to do a project, right? And when I was at Telstra, for instance, the partners would talk, and they came up with this cool idea to kind of do some techie thing, and they were super excited about that. And then the lawyers would be there and would be like, okay, we need to do the contract, and we need to have dispute resolution, and we need to have And so we were seeing the camps were really interesting. How they developed the sides. And I think that this is a similar kind of thing when we're looking at financial innovation. The lawyers are often the ones saying, okay, first of all, why are we doing this? And second, what could go wrong, and how do we deal with that? And the people who are creating these things that's not their focus, right? That's our focus, and we're sometimes seen as the downers, but it's an important role to play.